Thank you for finding a seat. We have more good things to come. Yeah, I do. I would like to make one brief announcement before we begin the next session. Of course, we have guests from many different places today, and I'm the Provost of the University, Daryl Tippins, and it's my pleasure to welcome each one of you who's visiting us from off campus. But perhaps our guests from the longest distance are from China here today. We have a group of attorneys, lawyers from China, and they're over here in the back on my left, and they have a translator with them. So if you hear a little bit of noise from the back, that's not because they're not paying attention. They really are paying attention, but they're getting a simultaneous translation of our session. So at this time, I'll turn the program over to our panelists.
Welcome, everyone. We are delighted to have you join us. I am not in your program, so just to let you know, my name is Najiba Saeed Miller, and I am both a professor of conflict resolution as well as a practitioner in the field of peace building, both locally as well as internationally, and have been delighted to be associated with the Strauss Institute for Dispute Resolution as an advisor over the past several years. We are very thankful for the chance to have a discussion today, and Professor Alford asked me to join you today to moderate this discussion as well as give you a few comments about the topic of reconciliation and discuss with you some of the issues that often come up in these settings. Let me first introduce our esteemed panel, and they will speak in the order as it appears in the program. And we have with us Rabbi Mark Diamond. Rabbi Mark Diamond is the Executive Vice President of the Board of Rabbis of Southern California and a member of the Senior Management Team of the Jewish Federation of Greater Los Angeles. Rabbi Diamond has partnered in projects with the Fuller Theological Seminary, the Abrahamic Faith-Based Reconciliation Project, World Vision International, and the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Los Angeles. And we know each other well, having worked with Muslim-Jewish dialogue for a few years through the mayor's office in Los Angeles. I'm not sure if I was allowed to reveal that, but I will. And he's always been very agreeable. Our next speaker is Imam Doctor, which is a new American Muslim title, the Imam Dr. Muzammil Siddiqui, who is a renowned Islamic scholar who serves as the chair of the Fiqh Council, Islamic Law of North America, the North American Islamic Trust, the Shura Council of Southern California. He is also religious director of the Islamic Society of Orange County and an adjunct professor at California State University, Fullerton, and with Chapman University. Last but not least, and most reverend, we have Reverend James Butler, who is, I just thought, Reverend James Butler was a great speaker. I wanted him to come back. We have with us the very delightful William Abraham, who is the Albert Cook Outler Professor of Wesley Studies at the Perkins School of Theology at Southern Methodist University. As I heard from his lovely accent, he is a native of Northern Ireland. We're waiting for the American accent to catch up. Who knows if it will? But he has a wonderful background as well as history for this particular subject. He teaches at the Perkins School of Theology at the Southern Methodist University in Dallas, Texas. His books include The Divine Inspiration of Holy Scripture, Divine Revelation and the Limits of Historical Criticism, and Crossing the Threshold of Divine Revelation. His current book project focuses on the relationship between theology and terrorism. If you will please join me in welcoming our esteemed panelists. I also wanted to thank Professor Alford and the Glazer Institute for their visionary leadership in putting together this wonderful discussion that we're having currently as well as the whole day. So one of the things I wanted to mention very quickly is why the word reconciliation is chosen instead of dialogue. For Abrahamic faith traditions, there is certainly much that is in common, and there is also much that is different. Within the theological traditions of each community as well as practice. And very often, dialogue has been utilized to promote an extremely relativistic or universal message that doesn't acknowledge the differences, the need for forgiveness, the need for acknowledging when there have been serious issues that have emerged, whether historically or in current settings. So I think reconciliation is a very fitting way to describe the process that's being engaged with today and in today and going forward. So I think it's important to understand that the focus is not to come to one unitary message that will be espoused by everyone. It's to see the richness of the tradition and to acknowledge when there is a need for serious conversation. One of the other things I wanted to introduce, the scaffolding around reconciliation, sort of the roadmap that we often talk about, is the need for single identity work. Very often when we come in gatherings like this, we have to really think of that proverb, know thyself. So as we come into discussions, it's not just the work that we do together, but it's the work that we do individually. Do we speak the same about others in our own gatherings, in our own congregations, and in our own settings that we speak when we are together? Because that's truly the test of whether there is any reconciliation that has happened. If the conversation is the same, then it's very problematic. Another concept that we take from the notion of conflict resolution is oppositional identities. Paula Pickering, in her analysis of the Balkans conflict, talks about the importance of realizing when one's identity becomes so much a part of who you are, but you are only in opposition to someone else. You forget, in fact, what it is that you came to the table with. So very often in reconciliation settings, I'm not saying within this particular setting, but having done work throughout the world on these issues, we often come to the table with an oppositional identity. And so unpacking and understanding what is our, as Paula Pickering said, what is our self-understanding? How does it include the other? But how do we also have a self-understanding of our own tradition, our own values, and our history? So oppositional identities are very important to have as a notion when we think about these. Last of all, I wanted to speak very quickly about something that I think has been helpful in my own work, which is realizing that we have had a long history with one another as traditions in the Abrahamic relationship that we all have as cousins, sisters, brothers. I'm not sure, maybe we feel like we're brother-in-laws, sister-in-laws, depending on your relationship with your in-laws, you can put on there whatever you want. But when we discuss our history or even teach our history to our own communities, we often think of times where the narrative and the mythology in the very positive sense, is associated with the notion that we will never get along, that we have never gotten along. And very often when I work with communities that are having discussions, I talk about the notion of re-mythologizing, to understand and acknowledge when there have been times in our history, our psyche, and our theology in which we have differed and perhaps even done more, hurt one another. But there have also been times in history, our psyche, and in our theology when in fact we have prospered with one another. And I think it's important to understand when were those times in history, whether it be in Turkey, whether it be in Spain, whether it be throughout our history, are there points that we could look to for learning? Because often when you talk if you talk to a young Muslim, the way that they might be taught their history is the history of the wars of the tradition. What if we did the opposite and we reframed our history not just in the wars between communities within our own, but also in the times of learning, of knowledge, exchange, and peace that did happen throughout our mutual history? So I just wanted to talk about those few concepts and acknowledge the wonderful power of the word and all of our traditions and the discussion. And so I will hand it over to, he's not my rabbi, but if I could have a rabbi, he'd be one of them. So, I'm sorry, there are several actually. I have a long list of rabbis, but he is certainly one of the thought leaders and also activists around social justice issues. I was honored to open up a conference around hunger, anti-hunger. So his depth of knowledge as well as his own commitment to walk the talk is tremendous. So we'll start with Rabbi Mark Diamond.
Najiba, thank you very much. Your secret is good with me. It's a pleasure to be here this morning, a pleasure to bat cleanup in this distinguished lineup. I want to begin by acknowledging and thanking two very special people seated in the front row, Diane and Guilford Glazer. Please join me in a round of applause. Very special friends, patrons of the Glazer Institute, generous benefactors of so many important causes here in Los Angeles, throughout the United States and throughout the world, humanitarians, and I'm proud to say my mentors and teachers, and thank you for sponsoring this day and for so much that you do to make this a better world. We really appreciate that. I also want to acknowledge, and with appreciation, Najiba, who we've co-conspired on a number of programs together, and my fellow panelists, Dr. Abraham, the first Irish Methodist I have met. We got to know each other last night, and I hope I meet more Irish Methodists. It's been wonderful. And Dr. Siddiqui, with whom I've shared a number of programs, one of which took place here at Pepperdine University earlier this year, and I will reference later in my remarks. Our session is entitled Dealing with the Outsider in Our Midst, and with great respect to Roger Alford and our colleagues here at Pepperdine, I want to begin by saying I'm not really comfortable with that term outsider. Let me just say that's the last you're going to hear me use the term. I don't think it fits. I don't feel like an outsider here. Indeed, I'm coming back to the campus tomorrow to lecture, and in 2 weeks with Jim Butler. So I'm certainly not an outsider here at Pepperdine. I don't feel like an outsider in Los Angeles or the United States or most anywhere I go in the world. So I would propose we dispense with that term and use the perhaps somewhat more neutral term of other. So, friends, who is the other? That's the subject of our panel. Who is the other? I would say the other are people of diverse backgrounds, nationality, language, race, culture, gender, sexual orientation, to name but a few. The notes for this session state, in a pluralistic society, we routinely rub shoulders with individuals who share our space but do not share our faith. I would remind us all that that is not limited to religious affiliation. I must tell you, I am the proud father of 3 beautiful children. My oldest daughter is a USC alumna. My other daughter is a UCLA alumna. Now, friends, let me tell you, their shared Jewish faith often wanes when it comes to rival school loyalties, especially on that fateful Saturday each fall when the Bruins and the Trojans clash in an epic battle on the football field. And, of course, my younger son, you should know that some members of my extended family went to Ohio State University, and my son picked University of Michigan, and don't get me started on that rivalry. So there are many things, many matters of faith that unite us but also divide us. I do want, in a more serious vein, to talk for a moment about the Jewish people as the outsider, or the other, if you will, in the diaspora. And I would reference just briefly two categories of where Jewish people are so often treated as the other, beginning with countries where Jews are a persecuted minority. I don't know how many of you saw this weekend's edition of the Wall Street Journal. Had a very fine but disturbing front-page story about the rescue of the small Jewish community of Yemen. Okay, and I would just hold it up because if my late grandparents were here, they would say that the Jewish women in burqas who went to New York City, funny, they don't look Jewish. But on a more serious note, there are about 350 Jews in Yemen. They have been subjected to increasing violence and anti-Semitic persecution, and very quietly, and not so quiet now if it's in the Wall Street Journal, they are being rescued and brought either to Israel or to the United States. So we still have places in the world where my people, the Jewish people, are the brunt of anti-Semitism and violence and are treated as, indeed, the other and outsiders. But then I would speak for a moment about nations where the Jewish people have thrived and flourished as a minority faith community. We are here in the United States, a nation that certainly has been very good to Jews, although it is sometimes referred to, I believe, in error as a Christian nation. All right, certainly a Christian majority, but again, I do not feel as the other or an outsider in this nation. However, I must tell you that having grown up in the south suburbs of Chicago, I recall vividly almost 40 years ago an experience I had as a teenager. I was working for a summer at a Ford Motor Company stamping plant. If you know the history of Henry Ford, there's a kind of a delicious irony in that a Jewish kid would be working at a Ford Motor Company stamping plant. It was to earn money for college. I must say I did not enjoy the work, but I made some good money to put away for my college studies. I worked throughout the summer next to a young man who was my age. We were 16, 17 at the time, and we struck up a bit of a friendship. We worked together on the presses all summer. The very last day before I left the job, we were sitting in the lunchroom, and he turned to me and said, "So I've been wondering this all summer, Mark. What are you?" Now, that's a kind of a deep existential question. I don't think that's what he had in mind, but when I was a kid of 16 or 17, I said, "I beg your pardon?" And he said, "What are you?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "What nationality are you?" And I sort of knew what he was getting at, but to be a little bit chutzpahdik, I said, "Oh, I'm American like you, of course. I was born and raised in Chicago." And he said, No, what religion are you?" And I said, "I'm Jewish." His jaw dropped open, and out of his mouth came a stream of anti-Semitic diatribes. He could not believe that a Jew would, and probably Henry Ford too, could not believe that a Jew would work in a Ford Motor Company plant. All Jews control Hollywood. All Jews control the media. All Jews are rich. He had experiences of Jewish people, and he could not believe it. And I could not believe, frankly, that somebody I had worked next to all summer, a colleague and friend, would spew such vile anti-Semitic myths. It was kind of a wake-up call to me at a young age that there was, and indeed there still is, in some parts of this country, anti-Semitism, people and places where Jews are treated as the other, as outsiders, as foreign, as different, as not belonging somehow to the society, and I clearly reject that with every bone and every part of my being. I would also remind us, as I begin to address this question, that, let's be candid, the other is often our co-religionists. Okay? Those of us in the room who do both interfaith work and intra-faith work, and that's what we do at the Board of Rabbis. We do Klal Yisrael work, trying to bring Jews and rabbis together across Jewish boundaries. We call that intra-faith, and then we do interfaith work. Let me tell you, it is much easier to do interfaith work every day of the year than to do intra-faith work. It is excruciatingly difficult to get Jews and 300 rabbis to work together across Jewish denominational boundaries. I would note in particular, and with some sadness, the widening gulf between the more traditional elements of the Jewish community and the more progressive or liberal elements of my community. And we do celebrate our occasional success stories when Jews do study together, something we're very proud of in the Board of Rabbis. And you may have seen in this weekend's Los Angeles Times a very nice story about a rabbi unity mission where our Consul General, Jacob Diane, who is addressing us later today, brought 18 rabbis to Israel. You can speak to me offline about that. It was not easy getting 18 rabbis from the different streams to come together. Not easy. So sometimes we feel that the other may be people in our own community, co-religionists who look and act and think differently than our own. But I do want to focus the majority of my remarks on the question at hand, which is the other being someone who is not of my faith. I'll let Rabbi Walpe speak about the other as someone who does not have faith. But our focus today in this panel, I believe, is on the other as someone who is Christian or Muslim or of another faith tradition. And what can we draw upon? What can I draw upon? And we draw upon from our Jewish tradition, from my Jewish tradition, to promote dialogue and coexistence. I would share with you all a text, a very famous rabbinic text from the Sifra, from the Midrash, which asks a wonderful question. What, if you had to pick one Jewish principle, if you had to choose one verse in the entire Torah that is the seminal verse, the seminal principle of the Jewish people and of Jewish tradition, what would it be? Two rabbis answer the question. You, of course, know two opinions. Okay? Rabbi Akiba, some 2,000 years ago, picked the verse that Rabbi Artson referenced earlier, V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, love your neighbor as yourself. He saw this verse from Leviticus as the great unifying principle of the Torah and the essence of what it means to be a Jew. Not a bad choice. I think many of us would vote for it. But his colleague, Ben Azai, disagreed, and he argued that we must understand that verse in connection with an earlier verse from the book of Genesis, one we just read a couple weeks ago in the synagogue on Shabbat morning. That verse from Genesis 5:1 says, Zeh Sefer Toldot Adam, B'yom bara Elohim Adam, b'demut Elohim asa oto. God, this is the record of Adam's line. God created the first human being in the divine image. According to Ben Azai, that verse from Genesis teaches that all people, all of us, are created in the image of God. We have a spark of the divine within us and the inherent potential to emulate God. The verse from Leviticus teaches a corollary. It's a secondary principle that all human beings deserve the same honor, respect, and love. By the way, for the record, Ben Azai beat the renowned Rabbi Akiba in that debate. No small feat, if you know rabbinic forensics. So friends, what does the lofty challenge to love your neighbor as yourself, what does that teach us about dealing with the other in our world? There was a great modern philosopher, Franz Rosenzweig, who wrote a wonderful book, a difficult book, and he analyzed the import of these words in his classic work, The Star of Redemption. And I quote, "Out of the endless chaos of the world, one nighest thing, his neighbor, is placed before his soul, and concerning this one, and well nigh only concerning this one, he is told, he is like you, and thus not you. You remain you, and you are to remain just that. But he is not to remain a he for you, and thus a mere it for your you. Rather, he is like you, like your you, a you, like you, and I, a soul." There will be a quiz on this afterwards, by the way, if you didn't get that. I prefer to study Rosenzweig quietly by myself under a tree in Malibu. This is not easy. But let me give you my interpretation of what he's trying to say. It's a great philosophical gem, and I think what he's saying is that we will never truly be able to love others like ourselves. We must not sacrifice our own identities in the quest to love others. Rather, we should recognize that they are like us. They are their own you. Their lives are every bit as precious, every bit as sacred, every bit as important and valuable as our lives. Good friends, it is relatively easy to wax poetic about loving others. It is far more challenging to discuss and debate what that means in practical terms. Jewish tradition recognizes that to create a caring community, like a caring family, a caring community must be built upon a foundation of shared ethics, which must encompass shared duties and shared responsibilities. Which leads me to ask, I think, the critical question, what are my obligations to the other, and what are their obligations to me? Too often we hear the word tolerance in interfaith conversation. Please take it out of the lexicon. Tolerance is one of my least favorite words in interfaith and intrafaith work. I want you to do more than tolerate me, and I certainly want to do more than tolerate each of you. Tolerance is good. Tolerance is an important step, but I would argue we need much more, and I would posit 5 qualities we need in our work together: knowledge, understanding, respect, passion, and compassion. Very briefly, we begin with knowledge of one another, knowledge of our respective beliefs and practices. To cite 2 examples in these hallowed halls of Pepperdine University, Hanukkah is not the Jewish Christmas. Sorry. Okay, and one that's more difficult to say in this campus, but since I'm here today and will be here tomorrow and again in 2 weeks, all right, Jews do not believe in Jesus as either the Son of God or the Messiah. Okay, we referenced it earlier. Rabbi Artson was very polite, and we can come back to that if you like, but that is a clear Jewish belief. We believe that Jesus was born a Jew, lived a Jew, and died a Jew. That is normative Jewish belief, and we do not accept Jesus in Jewish tradition as either the Savior or the Son of God. Okay, and I ask you to respect that belief, even as I respect the beliefs of Christians who have a profoundly different view, of course, of Jesus and his role in your tradition. Secondly, we need understanding. Beyond knowledge, we need understanding of one another, particularly our respective narratives. I'm very proud that the Board of Rabbis has sponsored a number of interreligious pilgrimages, most recently last year to the Vatican and Jerusalem, where we bring together Jewish, Christian, and Muslim leaders, because I am absolutely convinced that one of our problems in trying to solve the complex issues of the Middle East is we travel there and we are in parallel universes. I could be taking a group, a Jewish group, for example, to Israel. I could be within a half a kilometer of a Christian or Muslim group. We are meeting different people. We are talking to Israeli journalists, Israeli political leaders, rabbis of different stripes. We're visiting Tel Aviv, West Jerusalem, etc. And, for example, my Christian friends and colleagues are half a kilometer away, visiting Bethlehem and Nazareth, okay, meeting with Palestinian journalists, Palestinian leaders. We do not typically touch and see and hear and do the same things. How will we ever begin to solve any conflict if we don't have shared knowledge and shared experiences and shared understanding? I would also reference with, I hope Dr. Siddiqui, it's okay with you, right here at Pepperdine University, back in June, we had an amazing 2-day private conference of 20 leaders, 10 Jewish and 10 Muslim, brought together, of course, by a wonderful group of Christians in a group called an Abrahamic Reconciliation Seminar. And while I'm not supposed to divulge any of the secrets that we discussed, I will say it was a very honest and fruitful and important opportunity to sit together and to begin to wrestle with some of the most contentious issues that divide us as Muslims and Jews. I will tell you, for me, the most important part of the program was when our groups, which had been integrated throughout the 2-day conference, went apart and spent a couple of hours discussing two things. How has the other hurt us, and how have we hurt them? And we came back together and shared a long list on the board. Not surprisingly, the Jewish group had a whole Talmud there on the board. Our Muslim colleagues had a somewhat shorter list like the Mishnah, but it was important and important for us to begin to grapple with these most difficult issues. How have we caused hurt to others, and how have they given us offense and hurt us? Very important. Third category, respect. We must have respect for sincerely held faith traditions of various groups. I would cite a brief example from the interfaith world that was referenced, I think, in the LA Times. How do you take 18 rabbis to Jerusalem, to the Kotel, the Western Wall, and pray together? The answer is you really don't. Okay, what you do is, and what we did last, it's all a blur now, I think it was last Wednesday evening, all right, we had 5 Orthodox rabbis who went to the men's section of the Kotel, the Western Wall, to pray, and a dozen of us remained behind quietly in the back of that large plaza and had an actual egalitarian service of men and women together, but quiet and respectful so as not to cause a ruckus. Everybody respected each other. And believe me, if that can happen among a group of 18 rabbis, it can happen between Christians, Jews, and Muslims. No question. Passion. Thank you. Passion, the fourth category. I personally prefer to engage in interreligious work with people who are passionate about their own faith traditions. Can I be passionate about being a Jew and leave room for others who are equally passionate and dedicated about their own religious beliefs and practices? For me, the answer is unequivocally yes. I would argue that my own Jewish faith grows stronger, richer, and deeper with each interfaith experience I have. We don't get together as partners of interfaith work to convert one another. We come together to discuss and debate and talk about what unites us, but also what separates us. And finally, I would reference the last category of compassion. I firmly believe all of us as people of faith must begin to translate our religious passion into compassion for all of God's creatures. It is critical. Some of you may have been with me a couple weeks ago. We had a marvelous program at University of Southern California on the 7 Baha'i leaders who were falsely imprisoned in Tehran. And it was a wonderful showing. The auditorium, the Bovard Auditorium, was filled with students and faculty and community leaders, religious leaders, joined together with one clear message, how we must stand in solidarity with these brave men and women who are falsely imprisoned. Those of us who work in the interreligious field know that Baha'is are probably the nicest, most decent, most gentle people on the face of the earth. I frankly would say, in all honesty, that they're very different than most Jewish people I work with. Nothing could be further from the truth than these false charges that they have been charged with. 2 of those charges are punishable by death. And I, as a Jew and as a rabbi, felt, thank you, very strongly that we needed to come together to say we stand together. An assault upon any faith community is an assault upon all of us. It is terribly important. We recognize that. And now to bring this to conclusion in my closing 2 minutes, let me say the following. First, we need to reach deeper and wider in our interfaith work. I applaud Pepperdine University and the Glazer Institute for bringing us together today. I would also ask throughout the day, what will happen after today? We need to take this work that we're doing, this honest and forthright dialogue, and take it out to our churches, our synagogues, our mosques, take it out to people in the pews, not just academics and clergy. It's very important. Friends, for me, interfaith work is more than just holding hands and singing Kumbaya. That's very nice, although I don't sing very well. You wouldn't want to hear me singing Kumbaya. But interfaith work should be about more than gathering people together for celebrations and for sad occasions. We have to move beyond dialogue. Each and every one of us must do much more to learn to live together as the children of Abraham and the children of God. And for me, living together is not simply about tolerance, about dialogue, about coexistence. It is not simply about engaging in dialogue, which seems to be our favorite pastime. It is about people connecting to one another. Dealing with the other means building bridges, social, cultural, religious, educational bridges to bring people together. Unless we find a way to build those bridges, we will not be successful in finding ways to live together and to share and build our future together. And so to that end, I firmly believe that we must practice and preach the finest and truest ideals of our faith traditions in our universities, in our seminaries, in our houses of worship, and throughout our community. People of diverse faiths need to sit together, break bread together, study together, pray together in order to understand and respect what divides us and what unites us. And above all else, I firmly believe that we must translate our religious passion into compassion for others. To me, our mission, our mandate as people of Abraham, as children of Abraham, is quite clear. We are commanded to uplift the fallen, heal the sick, shelter the homeless, and feed the hungry. We are commanded to renounce hatred, violence, and persecution wrought in the name of misguided religious fervor. We are commanded to strengthen and to deepen our commitment to repair and to redeem our broken world. My friends and colleagues, if we rededicate ourselves to this sacred mandate, then our words and our deeds will truly reflect love of God and love of God's children. Thank you.
Salaam Alaikum. Peace be to all of you. First of all, I would like to thank Glazer Institute and Pepperdine University for this gracious invitation. I'm pleased that we are here again at Pepperdine. Myself, as Rabbi Mark Diamond mentioned, we were here a few months ago discussing together as children of Abraham, how to bring reconciliation among ourselves, among our people. I'm here very pleased that we are meeting under the spirit of the mandate of Micah, to do justice, to love mercy, to walk humbly with your God. The Quran says, worship God, join nothing with him, be good to your parents, to relatives, to orphans, to the needy, to neighbors near and far, to the companion by your side, to the traveler in need, and to those under your authority. Indeed, God does not like arrogant, boastful. The world in which we live today is rightly called a global village. The modern means of transportation and communication have narrowed the distances and brought together people of diverse faiths, cultures, and colors. Modern political and economic conditions have moved millions of people of other faiths and cultures to work and live side by side. Our neighbors today increasingly are not only those whom we know or who are known to us, there are also many who are outsiders, in our midst. We are nonetheless all neighbors, and we should treat each other as neighbors. It is the duty of religious people of all faiths to provide moral vision for the inhabitants of this global village. We must learn to live with love, peace, and justice for all our neighbors. What relationship do we have with others? What are our responsibilities? How to be good neighbors? How can we be true to our faith and be open and good to others? What are the challenges living in a pluralistic society? Where and how we need to improve our relations? These are some important questions that we should be discussing in our interfaith work, in our interfaith dialogues. I would like to submit some ideas about dealing with others from my Muslim perspective. Since we Muslims believe in 5 pillars, so I have put everything in 5. First of all, let me say something about other. Let me begin with the concept of other. The word other can be used in a neutral and positive way, and the word other can be used in a negative, pejorative way. Sometimes we say myself and other as a matter of distinction, as a matter of identity. Sometimes we say we and other to express diversity. Different type of people, different way. We, our people in our area, and then other people, so this we talk about diversity. But sometimes the other is also used to mean inferior, not good, wrong, enemy. Sometimes the word is used, the word other is used to exclude, to demonize, to dehumanize, or even to subordinate and subjugate or to fight. All of these are uses for the word other. It is very important that religious people today in this global village develop a theology of the other. What do we talk in our tradition about the other? What our tradition says about the other? Before I say a few things about this Islamic theology of the other, let me say that I am talking to you about from the primary source of Islam, the Quran. I'm not going to talk about the cultural practices or socio-political behavior of one or the other group of people. In all our religions, we do have people who follow the normative teachings, and also those who either ignore them or misinterpret them for their own purposes. As far as Islam is concerned, it is very important to understand that everything begins with the concept of God. There is only one God for all humanity. So God is one, and God created all people of all colors and all races and all nationalities, wherever they live. It is God who has created them, and it is God who has given them honor and dignity. I'll take a long time, more than 20 minutes if I start quoting the verses from the Quran, but so I left that. Actually, I had it in my longer version of the paper, but I said maybe I'll put it away because I not have time for that. Human beings are the noblest creation of God, and they are not only God's creation, but they are also God's representative on this earth. And God created everything in the heaven and the earth for the sake of human beings. And God created all human beings from one single pair of a male and female. All human beings are thus related to each other. They are diverse in their colors, races, and speak different languages. And the varieties among human beings are not a curse, but a sign of divine creative power and blessing. The diversity should be appreciated and enjoyed. All human beings are equal. regardless of their races, colors, or languages, cultures, or nationalities. There is no superiority of any race or color over another. No one is better than the other because of his race, gender, or nationality. And then God commands justice and fair dealing for all people. Justice is the foundation of a good society. Justice must be done to all people, even to your enemies. All human beings have certain inalienable rights. As the previous speaker, Muslim speaker, Mr. Jihad Turk, was speaking about the 5 basic values of Islam, of the Islamic law: the right of life, the right of intellect, the right of family, the right of property, and the right of religion. These are agreed upon principles in Islam, in Islamic law. But when it comes to religions, what is the Islamic view of religions, or the plurality of religions? There are many religions in the world today. Among the religions, there are similarities and differences. The existence of so many religions is a proof that we human beings are religious by nature. From the Islamic point of view, we may say that this is so because God instilled in us his awareness in our primordial nature. In Arabic, it is called fitra. All human beings have a common religiousness, just as they have a common sense. And Islam teaches that God chose many prophets and messengers from among the human beings at different times, and not only in the Middle East, although we mentioned all the prophets of the Middle East, but the prophets of God came to all people, to every part of the world at different times. And the message of all the prophets of God were identical as far as the fundamental beliefs are concerned. Religions share many common values, especially Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. They are family religions. That's why they are called, according to the Quran, Jews and Christians are called people of the book. We have one and the same God. Allah, Elohim, and Allah come from the same Semitic root. We have common prophets and common stories of the prophets: Noah, Abraham, Isaac, Ishmael, Jacob, Lot, Moses, David, Solomon, Jonah, Job. These are the common prophets of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Moses and Jesus are the most honored and oft-mentioned prophets in the Quran. Islam recognizes the Torah, the Psalms of David, the Gospel of Jesus as divine books. There are many similarities between Islamic law, Sharia, and the Jewish law, Halakha. With Christianity, there are also many similarities. Islam accepts Jesus as great prophet, recognizes his virgin birth, highly respect his mother Mary, accept his miracles, accept that he was given a gospel, that he ascended to heaven, that he was the Messiah, that he will come back before the end of the world. There are many moral and ethical teachings of Jesus that are common between Islam and Christianity. We do have our differences, but there are more things in common than things that are different. Islam also recognizes the individuality of human beings and of their groups and communities. The religious history of mankind is not all and the same, but it has a mixed bag of things that are authentic, valuable, and things that are not so authentic and so valuable. If God had so willed, say the Quran, he could have forced people to come together and be guided, but he allowed them to use their own free will and live according to this freedom. Islam teaches that Muslims to respect the people of all religions and to have good relations with all people. One should not bear false witness against any people. This means that one should not misrepresent other people's faith and religious views. The religious discourse must be with respect and in the best possible manner. Now, finally, let me come to the point of how we should live in this pluralistic world. It is imperative that we all live as good neighbors in this shrinking world of diverse faiths and cultures. This can only happen if we recognize the rights of others and teach other people and groups with honor and respect. All our religions teach love and respect of the other, love of God and love of the neighbor. Do to others what you would like others to do to you. Love for your brother what you love for yourself are common teachings. This should not be just slogans, but they should be put to practice on all levels. We should not only preach them, but we should also apply them in our social, economic, political policies and in our national and international relations. There are 5 suggestions that I would like to make. First of all, dialogue and tolerance. No polemics and confrontation. People of diverse faiths and cultures must dialogue and try to understand each other. Tolerance must be practiced on the levels of individuals, groups, as well as states. It should be a political and legal requirement. Tolerance should be between the members of the same community and same religion, as well as with the people of other faiths. Tolerance should be also emphasized between the people of different cultures. We do have differences in our religions, but we must try to understand each other. As we learn about our own faith traditions and communities, we should also learn about others. Someone rightly said, understanding others changes us. By understanding, we learn the areas of commonalities as well as differences. We can learn the nature of differences and the extent of differences. We must look what kind of dialogue could be of value and what issues are most in need of respectful dialogue at these times. What concerns for the well-being of others could drive our efforts to reach common ground for action. Each group must encourage and facilitate shared responsibility to create a more sensitive and welcoming environment for our diverse groups. And then the second point that I would like to mention is the freedom of expression, not demonization, propaganda, and deliberate misinformation. People must be free to express their ideas and feelings. They should have full right to differ and disagree, but they must express themselves with truth and decency. Demonization of others, false propaganda, and deliberate distortion of others' views and traditions would not promote pluralism or good neighborliness. They would rather create alienation and anger. The media is a powerful tool, and it can help in building bridges of understanding and coexistence between various religions and cultural communities. Media and entertainment industry should be careful not to feed people by misinformation and propaganda against other religions and cultures. As we do not want others to misrepresent us, we should also not misrepresent others. Freedom of expression should not be a license to spread lies. Other cultures and religions should not be misrepresented. Media outlets should be held responsible not to propagate and perpetuate hate against any group of people or their recognized faith and values. We have, I'm very happy to mention that we Muslims and Jews have worked for the last 2 years. We've been working on this issue of anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. We have a group of rabbis that are speaking against Islamophobia, and a group of imams are speaking against anti-Semitism. And this work is growing. Number 3 is cooperation and collaboration, not domination or hegemony. In the global village, the neighbors cannot live in peace when some neighbors try to exploit and dominate others. Justice, fair dealing, live and let live can work much better rather than push for control and power. All human beings should be treated with respect and dignity. No race should enslave the other race. No country and culture should dominate the whole world. Modernization does not necessarily mean westernization, and globalization is not the domination of one group over the whole globe. And number 4, is economic justice and sharing, not exploitation and extortion. The gap between the have and have-not should be reduced. We must see that all human beings have the opportunity to live with dignity. Deprivation and poverty are the main contributing factors for much of the discontent and violence today, and should be recognized. The world powers are willing to spend billions on weapons and military buildup and wars, but very little for the economic well-being of the poor people of the world. And finally, civil society, ethical and moral behavior. We should promote ethical and moral behavior in our communities and neighborhoods. Honesty, truthfulness, courtesy, and kindness should be emphasized. Strong and good families and religious groups can play an important role in this regard. We must promote good family values and must remove pornography and indecency from our societies. We must encourage and support an educational system that promotes openness, dialogue, and guard against fanaticism. Our educational system should not teach every view in the absolutist terms. Our students should be taught that there could be various perspectives, and one should be open to the other's point of view. We should also promote human rights of all people, more political freedom, open debates, participating democracies, and representative governments. These are some of the steps when living in this pluralistic world, and we all have to work on that. This is a big task, and it's a big work, and this requires support and work of all people. No one religion, no one country, no one group can do all of these things. It requires cooperation and collaboration of everyone. Thank you.
Well, let me say immediately that it's a great pleasure to leave the low living and high thinking of Dallas and come over here to the low thinking and high living of Malibu. The topics before us today require long-haul intergenerational conversation. And I'm in it for the long haul. We're not going to solve the problems that are on our plate overnight. We're not going to do it in one generation. We're going to have to hand this over from one generation and really work on this hard. Now, I come at this, of course, from within the Christian tradition, and from within the Christian tradition, I come out of the Irish situation. Now, by ecclesial affiliation, I'm a United Methodist, but United Methodists are united as much as Free Methodists are free. If any of you don't know how unfree Free Methodists are, I'll tell you afterwards. I have to tell you, Dr. Butler, that the Wesleyan quadrilateral has collapsed. And that the dear appeal, the wonderful appeal to scripture, tradition, reason, and experience, some of us are deconstructing that with a vengeance, so that needs to be updated, but that's no harm to you. I come at this having lived half of my life in Ireland, more or less, and half of my life in the United States. And I have to say, I come at this also with a long shadow of reflection on terrorism. Terrorism is the use of violence to achieve political ends, and use of violence against innocent people to achieve political ends. And it's a very serious business. Now, before I get to the three sort of main areas that I want to comment on, I want to clear my throat even further. I think our differences have been brutal. And we need exactly, therefore, the retrieval of those bright spots in our history. And I speak from within the Christian tradition. If you look at the history of the Reformation and what happened after that, is absolutely appalling. The Lutherans said to the Anabaptists, "Oh, you want to be rebaptized and immersed, do you? We'll immerse you, we'll drown you." And they did it. The Anglicans, out of which the Methodists come, are the Labradors, the warm, cuddly Labradors of the Christian tradition. And yet what they did to the Jesuit missionaries after the Reformation is absolutely appalling. So I want to begin sort of my remarks with a deep realism of a brutal history that we've got to acknowledge and get beyond. Secondly, there are very dangerous people out there. When I was working in Ireland, my phone was tapped by a group of Protestant paramilitaries. In Ireland, you can be Protestant without being Christian. I was brought up Protestant without being Christian. I became a befuddled atheism when I was a teenager, and I came to the Jewish God through the Son of God called Jesus, the incarnate one. Now, that we'd have to talk about afterwards. When I lived in Carrollton, outside Dallas, I got a death threat because people thought I was Jewish. Anti-Semitism is real and live, and it is becoming a reinvigorating virus in Britain that has to be faced, along with Islamophobia. Politics, because ultimately I want to get at peace in politics. Politics is a very nasty business. It's the most interesting sport out there. And it brings forth the worst in us, and it brings forth the best in us. But ultimately, we've got to get to the political arena, and I'm going to get to that in the last part of my remarks. Further, and this is the last of my throat clearing, the myth of secularization that has been at the heart of modernity is exactly that. It is a myth. I was brought up on the belief that all of the world was going to become like England. English have a way of thinking that way sometimes. Forgive me for those of you who are English in the audience. So we were all just going to fall into line. We were all going to give up religion. We were all going to give up belief in God. It was going to spread to the United States. It was going to jump over the Rio Grande River into South America, then jump over to Africa, then jump elsewhere. It is total nonsense. Religion is back. It's here with a vengeance, and we've got to deal with it in the public square. So my sort of background remarks here are simply, we live and operate in a stormy world, and we cannot will away the hurricanes that will come in from the coast to hit us from time to time. And if you want an easy intellectual life, go and do subatomic physics or constitutional law. Don't deal with these issues. Now, I want to divide my remarks into three areas. Better get my watch out here, make sure I stay on time. First, I want to pick up the issue of how we frame the issue, and this, I'm sure, will reflect my own Christian background. It'll certainly reflect my background as an analytic philosopher. That's not a disease, by the way. It's a very good training. The second topic I want to take up is how we should think about digging into our resources, and I want to insist on digging into our own particular specific resources for the issue in hand, and in that case, my own Christian resources. And then I want to ask you to pay attention to the American context, which I think is very, very important, and within that, to the topic of civil religion. So here we go. But I don't have a fight with any of my Jewish friends or my Muslim friends, so what am I going to be reconciled about? We're going to ask, what's behind that? This comes up, by the way, as a central issue in Ireland, in the north of Ireland, where we put a lot of emphasis, emotionally, spiritually, theologically, and whatnot, on reconciliation, and realized, in fact, that what we really needed was peaceful coexistence and enrichment of each other from within our own identities. Now, that may seem terribly low level, but you know, if you've had civil war in which your best friends were being killed, and other friends have to put up bulletproof windows just to survive, to get to the point where you have coexistence and where you can work out your political decisions together, that is actually extremely important. Now that takes us to the issue of the outsider in our midst. Here I entirely agree with Rabbi Diamond. We're all insiders. All we've got is some insiders are older and more alienated, or alienated because they've been here a long time. and others are newcomers and they're alienated because they don't feel entirely welcome. We're all insiders in this business together. I'm not an American citizen, but I'm a Texan, honorary Texan. My daughter has just become an American citizen. And the problem with thinking of ourselves as outsiders is if you think of yourself as an outsider, the first thing you want to do is get rid of them. But if you conceive it fundamentally as insiders, and then whatever the problem is around that, then the issue, the real problem becomes, how do we actually find a way to settle our disputes by argument, by robust political means, rather than by coercion or violence? So the implications of moving to this is, for me, I have a very low standard here. Let's stop killing each other. Now, we Methodists didn't get to kill anybody because we came along late. Like the Church of Christ. They're like stylites on top of that pillar. And they can actually have an incredible influence because they are a threat to nobody. But how do we actually stop killing each other and organize political means of reaching consensus and agreement in our civil order in ways where we work from argument and persuasion, and we actually find ways to draw on the best resources that we've got? So, if you like, I'll put it this way. I don't want to set the bar too high. Maybe I'm just a terrible curmudgeon at this stage. I'm just a miserable, pessimistic, half-drunken Irishman. That what we really need is to say, you know, if we could get to the point where all our peoples throughout the world were to commit to peaceful coexistence with one another, and if we were to commit to settling our differences by argument and persuasion and not by violence and coercion, that would be, for me, an incredible step forward. And by the way, in many ways, that's exactly what we got to in Ireland. You know, I've met the victims of violence and terrorism. And to speak of reconciliation is the highest ideal you could ask for. But if we can at least live with one another as neighbors and commit to taking care of one another as best we can, I actually think that's an incredible achievement. Now, the second point I want to get at is, I love the common material we have together. And of course, there's been wonderful catalogues of this, and we need to sort of insist on that. Loving God, loving our neighbour, being made in the image of God, being committed to all sorts of platitudes, that we're going to respect each other, and so on and so forth. All those platitudes, all that common ground is vital. But we don't have to stop there. I think part of the next stage of our work together is how do we draw on the deepest materials in our own resources in order to secure a peaceful civil order and the best possible political order that we can get our hands on. Now, that's going to require dealing with the poison in our own traditions. And I know there's been poison in our own tradition. And the poison in our own tradition was that we confused our interpretation of divine revelation with divine revelation. So if I didn't agree with Calvin on what he had to say about double unconditional predestination, right, then in fact I was disagreeing with God. But all I was doing was disagreeing with John Calvin. We disagree deeply on the sources of divine revelation. If you're committed to divine revelation, you've got to take it seriously. This is not just Dan Rather on the evening news. Divine revelation, however we want to play it out, is from God. And you don't play around with what God gives you. All of our traditions say that. How are we going to figure out what our traditions are actually saying and the poison that's been introduced because we have confused the claim to possess divine revelation with God himself? And then what we need to do beyond getting at some of those mistakes is to go after and figure out where did our traditions go wrong, and where within the deepest levels of our tradition can we find the resources to live in a truly civil society. I could say a lot more about all of that. By the way, in my tradition, we have what we call a Catholic spirit. And it says simply this: we are friends of all and the enemies of none. That was drilled into me when I was a boy. I remember there were some others from my own Christian tradition. They tried to get us to go, my wife and I, to go to be as missionaries. And I remember the troubles were starting in the north of Ireland. And the man said to us, this wonderful man said to us, he wanted us to be missionaries to a new tribes group that had never heard the gospel. And he said, you know those Catholics up the Falls Road? I'm like David. I hate them with a perfect hatred. There were chills down my back. Now, we've got to figure out how do we draw on the Catholic spirit, for me, of our own tradition. If your heart's with my heart, give me your hand. We will give to anybody and everybody who is in need. That's at the heart of our tradition. It hasn't always been at the heart of our tradition, but we need to go into the deep resources of our tradition. We need to clean them up, and we need to find those elements that are actually going to reinforce and draw on that which will make us, in fact, really good public citizens. And here's the last thing I want to talk about very briefly. I've got 3 minutes. I think you've got to take seriously in the United States civil religion. Now, what do I mean by that? America is not just a secular experiment. It's a theological experiment. You didn't go the way of France, where you eliminated religion from the public square, and you didn't go the way of England, where you had a confessional state with tolerance of Roman Catholics, possibly at the edges. If you weren't a Trinitarian in 18th century England, kiss it goodbye. You don't even get to go to Parliament. Jews didn't get to go to Parliament until the late 19th century. We had a confessional state. Now, what did you do? You didn't go the route of France and eliminate God from the public square, but you didn't go the way of Britain and establish Christianity. This is not a Christian nation. This is a nation with a very complex and interesting civil religion, with its own scriptures, its own holy days, its own central virtues, its own interesting vices, and it has ways in which, in fact, you can draw on religion in the public square in ways that's constructive and not poisonous. Now, I'm not going to, I got at this, by the way. I was once trying to write a paper on the political theology of George Bush. People told me that would be a very short paper. That is not true, actually. You cannot understand Obama, President Obama, without understanding, in fact, his place as high priest in the civil religion of the United States. So what we've got to think through at this stage, in my judgment, is that you have invented a very interesting moral, religious, and political tradition and system in which you will allow God in the public square, just go to your great public and national holidays. It allows all sorts of heresies, including total unbelievers. And what it allows you to do is to believe in the same God, even when we do not worship the same God. Now, I'm dumping a lot on you at this time, but that's part of what I love to do. What we have in common is that we believe, as Jews, Christians, and Muslims, in the same God. We do not worship the same God. And working through that in relationship to the fullness of the civil religion that you've got here, which allows you to actually take religion into the public square in a very carefully negotiated and constructed way, that I think actually is an asset. It's also a problem, but it's an asset that in fact seems to me to be crucial in the future development of a civic society in which Jews, Muslims, Catholics, Protestants, the whole lot can actually find a way to recognize the deep significance of religion in our public life. So my 3 points then, let me just finish again to remind you. We need to be careful how we frame the issue. And I'm a low-level guy. I just want peaceful coexistence. B, we need to go after the deep elements of our own traditions, and we've got to figure out the pathologies of those traditions and the riches of those traditions that can enhance and deepen our life together in the civic order. And then lastly, a heretical point, you need to come to terms with the fact that you do have, in fact, an established religion in this country, and it's a religion that most of you don't recognize, and that, in fact, is an interesting asset as you move forward into the future. Thank you.
We have about 15 minutes, so if I could have all the hands raised for people who want to speak, and I'm just going to number off because we'll take, I think, about 4 questions. I have 1, and then 2, the lady right there, 3, that gentleman, and then we'll take the 4th all the way in the back. So if I didn't call you, then let's just start with these 4. And please address it to the individual panelists to whom you have the question for.
Oh, that'll be a little hard to do, but perhaps one of them will comment on this. The Muslim community has come out with this beautiful offering to the world of a common ground, and which was greeted very generously and happily by the rest of the world community. And the common ground is our belief in one God and our belief that we must love our neighbor. How beautiful and how simple. And from that comes, we must have actions. And one of the actions I think we can have is prayer. And I would like one of you, or perhaps more, to mention how prayer can be used in this context. And I would like to mention a medallion I'm wearing that says, I work and pray for peace in Arabic and English. The stars in the middle represent people of all religions. On the back are the names of 2 Muslim children. I pray for them every day that they will always live in peace. And there is a Muslim woman in my hometown, Thousand Oaks. She is wearing one with the names of my grandchildren on. She prays for them. I think this is one place to begin to work our common ground.
Thank you very much. I certainly appreciate that. The document, those of you who do not know, the document had known a common word between you and us. This is a statement that was prepared by 138 Muslim scholars, theologians, imams of various traditions. Actually, the first time people have in the recent history that many Muslims came together, Sunnis and Shias and all kind of, from every country almost. They put a document together, and it is available on the online. It's called The Common Word. It was we appreciate very much that the Catholic community as well as various other denominations, they have took it seriously. There was a conference that was held at Yale University last year, and there was recently a conference just a few weeks ago was organized at Georgetown on this whole document and discussing that. Not only just have prepared a statement, but also looking for the practical point and the practical action. This is something that we have to work on continuously, really. That is that we do have good statements available. We do have good common point there, but again, there should be a common plan for action. And I think I very much appreciate your point. That is the prayers. That is not only pray for ourselves, but pray for others as well. Pray for the people of all faith.
Oh,
Thank you.
A second person, yeah, please go ahead. And I did 4, so if you could bring the mic there.
I'm Rabbi Wendy Spears, and it's really enlightening and a pleasure to be here this morning. Historically, women have been the outsider in our 3 faith traditions, and in 2009, I'm astonished that there is not a single woman sitting on the panel all day long. So I would like to address my question to our moderator. As a religious person, what would you say would be the woman's voice in talking about finding common ground and including the outsider in our midst?
You know, I think that's an incredibly rich answer, and in fact, that perhaps is an idea. And I know I've been talking to Professor Walford about a convening specifically on religion and women of the 3 traditions. So I think that is, in fact, an area that needs to be illuminated much further. And I think that, you know, I think answering that question, my area of Islamic law does focus on women in marriage, and that's my area of publication. But I think it's a whole session, and to do it justice, we need to give it a whole conference. Correct? So I would encourage him to do that. Thank you. And thank you for raising that point. There was number 3. Did you identify? Yes, sir, in the hat. Did you want to ask the third question? I think I identified you earlier. And then there was 4 in the back.
Hello, my name is Anthony Mnusis. I'm a Quaker, and I'm involved with various interfaith organizations, including the Parliament of World Religions and Interfaith Communities Uniting for Justice and Peace. I want to speak about that second organization in the context of reconciliation. And just that organization was founded after 9/11, and its motto is, religious communities must stop blessing war and violence. And specifically, we were looking at, well, thank you. Specifically, we were concerned about the war in Iraq, now the war in Afghanistan, the issue of torture. And we bring together Muslims, Jews, Christians, Buddhists, and other people of faith to try to end violence which uses religion as an excuse. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about your feelings on this kind of interfaith
To whom are you
justice
addressing
work.
your question?
Anyone who'd like to
Yes,
respond,
I think
including you.
This is a wonderful question, and I'll tackle it from just quickly 2 angles. One is, I'm not a pacifist, and I've never been guilty that I wasn't a pacifist, and have no intention of being a pacifist. So I stand in a different stream of the Christian tradition, and I think that the Christian tradition is deeply divided over this, and will continue to be so. One of the reasons why I'm not a pacifist is because I think, and this is the present company accepted, I think in dealing with the issue of violence, and in particular dealing with the issue of terrorism, I think you're going to have an utterly multi-layered approach to it. And that'll go everything from folk like you, if I may say so, and I'm not being patronizing, folk like you who will hold the whole world accountable in trying to get a stop going to war, but right up to armies, and right up to double agents. Why did the IRA come to the table in the north of Ireland? You won't hear this in most of the reports. It was because they were completely infiltrated right to the top by double agents. If you've got a terrorist organization, you have to have somebody who's a disciplinarian, who knows everything that is agreed when you kill innocent people. The disciplinarian in the IRA was, in fact, a double agent. His name was Steak Knife. His name was the Nutter. Now, this is not pleasant material. This is why, I don't know whether I can say this, but I love the God of the Old Testament. And our Lord did not, well, I'll not go there. But I just want to say, listen, when the terrorists, I don't mind you doing what you want to do if you're a pacifist. But if you come after my Jewish friend, or you come after my Muslim friend, I want a soldier and I want an army to protect them. And therefore, the disputes that we've got, again, this is where I think we've got to draw, you draw on your Quaker tradition, I will draw on the whole tradition of just war, justified war, recent work by Niebuhr, my colleague Robin Lovin, and so on and so forth. And we've got to bring all of that to the table because these problems are so deep and they're so difficult, right? They are so deep and they're so difficult that we need all hands on deck, and we need even our disputes on deck, and not just what we have in common.
We had a 4th question in the back. Yeah, the young man in the back that's standing up, he was the 4th one, and then we'll be closing.
Thank you for a really remarkable panel. We talked a lot about some very important and large generalities and principles. I hope that maybe each of you could identify maybe a highly specific thing at the policy level that if you had your wish or your ability to make a particular change, or where there might be leverage in the policy community, wherever you choose, to have kind of a significant and immediate impact on some of these things. But if you could pick, and you were speaking to someone that mattered, what would you do?
Thank you. It's a great question. I'll start with something, an issue that Najiba referenced earlier. Los Angeles is known as the hunger capital of the nation. We speak correctly about problems around the world, global issues, right here in our own community, we have more people who go hungry each and every day than anywhere else in this nation. And very proud that our community, through the Jewish Federation, the Board of Rabbis, is partnering not only with synagogues, but also with churches and mosques and other faith communities. Najiba referenced the Interfaith Hunger Summit, which was an attempt to say, look, we're not going to solve the problems of the Middle East, okay? Not even sure we're going to solve the problems of hunger. But right here in our own backyard, we have serious, serious issues. And both on the policy level and on the social justice level, we need to band together. It's something I know we all can agree on, is there should not be people going hungry right here in our midst.
There's a number of practical steps taken by the Muslim community to see that this kind of program go on in different places. The another step that was taken is this, what I mentioned before, is the mosques and the Jewish temples coming together, twinning of the mosques and temples in different cities all over the country, and having meetings together, sometime in the mosque, sometime in the temple. These kind of steps are very important, and these are things that are happening on the local level. I think we have to build on that.
This is a very tough question, not being a politician or the son of a politician. But I think that, I'll make a general comment and then a specific one. I think that we need to make sure in the public arena, and I think this is a policy level for government as a whole, not to give us contraceptive pills that stop us saying certain things when we get into the public arena because they don't sort of satisfy the law faculty at Harvard or the philosophy department at UCLA. Now, what I mean by that is that there's a real deep issue here as when we get into the public order, are we only allowed to say those things that can be translated into the language of secular atheism? And I don't think we should accept that as Democrats, and I don't think we should accept that sort of metaphysical imposition upon us by those who claim to be brights at the current point of history. That's my first point. My second point is a very simple one. I think that at the governmental level, supporting, nurturing, and funding, I don't know what to call this, but second-level diplomacy operations and practices. That's to say, bringing people of all faiths and of none into forums and into university settings and elsewhere where they can actually thrash out the kind of issues that we're just beginning to work on here and allow those to be a kind of leaven in the whole political and cultural and moral world. I think peace is a very complex operation, and the kind of thing, maybe this should be done just by private philanthropists or whatever, but I met recently a remarkable Christian from Israel who's in a university there, and they're working on a peace curriculum. And I said, that's marvelous, but you know, some of what we need help. He went to the government, the State Department, and said, give us the cost of a bomb. I thought that was really smart. just what it would cost to put a bomb together, just give it to us. And he actually got money. I think he got money. And what he wants to do is to bring Jews, Christians, and particularly Muslims together. And I think if we could begin to do that, and a lot of this is going to have to be done low radar, underneath the, much of it in private. But I think that the support of educational and other low-level diplomatic efforts to increase understanding, to bring about friendships, for ideas to surface, if that's within the policy region of the government, then I'd say give us the price of 4 bombs rather than just 1. And give the price of 1 bomb to Pepperdine.
I wanted to acknowledge that this is only the opening of a discussion, and so if you feel full, you feel that you want to engage, then this institute and Pepperdine are responsive, and I encourage you. I wanted to give you a resource. The Institute for Multi-Track Diplomacy is engaging in multi-track diplomacy work, as he mentioned. And also, just to close with one observation, that a lot of the discourse in this conference is very aspirational. It is very high-minded, and which is wonderful. I think my recommendation for us is to do some joint publication and writing around the aspirational parts of our faith and our tradition, our theology, and as a lawyer around Islamic law. But I feel that we also need to get to some of the realistic, deep, divisive, painful political discussions. And so I think this is a wonderful opening, and I think we need to keep the aspirational in mind, but I also wanted to recommend, as you explore subjects for the future, how do we create that space for peaceful coexistence, if that's what we're aiming for. So I wanted to just make that observation, but thank everyone for their time today. Yes, we have to.
The question that is asked is, where did I get that name? I presume you don't mean Billy, you mean the Abraham part. There are three possibilities. I give them, they're telegrams here. One is that it was originally an Irish name in County Cork, way deep down south, and it was something like Mac and Abratham. And then the English, when they came over, they couldn't spell, so they changed it to Mac Abraham. And the Irish shortened it to Abraham. There are Abrahams around Cork, way down there. The second possibility is that our ancestors were some of these people I've been referring to here, namely the nasty, brutal ones. Life is short, nasty, and British. We could have been part of Cromwell's army that settled in Ireland, because some of Cromwell's army, when they settled in Ireland, actually took biblical names. The hermeneutics of that I leave to the biblical people. And the third one, which of course I prefer, is that we are Jews who became Huguenots in France and got driven out into the bogs of Ireland. And one group came to Belfast, and one group came to Portadown, and one came to the bogs of Ireland in Enniskillen. And I hope, and I can't pray because God doesn't change the past, I hope that that's the tribe that I belong to.